Hello and welcome everyone to the Solo Multimedia Podcast, where I give you my unfiltered take straight off the cuff. And today I am going to be talking about the new Charli XCX album, Crash. First thing, I'm really sorry there's been a lack of podcasts this week. I don't really know what to say. There just hasn't been a ton out that I've been listening to, and on top of that, I've just been kind of busy, to be honest. So I do apologise. But regardless, let's get into this. Charli XCX, I'm a pretty big fan ever since the Vroom Vroom era, as every other hipster on planet Earth has been, I guess. I really liked her movement into PC music, or I guess what is now known as like hyperpop. I thought it fit her whole personality and the way she kind of like delivered not only the lyrics but the way she did like the vocal delivery and whatnot. It all really suited her singing style. I thought it was a good move, even just aesthetically as well. It worked really, really well for what she wanted to do. Big fan of How I'm Feeling Now and the self-titled Charlie record. I also thought, honestly, number 7 Angel, I think that's what that mixtape was called. I thought that was almost a little bit slept on. I thought that was actually like a really good batch of tracks for the most part. Kind of hit and miss, admittedly. There are a couple real stinkers on that mixtape, but overall, definitely appreciate it more than I think most people. I go back to it on a semi-regular basis. But anyway, all of that leads us up to Crash. I guess in her early career, she just did more like generic pop, I suppose, and then she pivoted into the PC music style stuff, and that pretty much catches you up to speed. And on this record, I feel like this is almost her equivalent of when rappers make a short back to basics album after a like very ambitious project. Like, for example, like after Danny Brown made Atrocity Exhibition, he made You Know What I'm Saying, which is just a, stripped back, I just want to rap, fuck all these bigger concepts, fuck all the kind of like, incredibly ambitious production, that kind of stuff. I just want to make an album where I rap. And I feel like that's what's happening here a little bit. Like, after making essentially 3 really relatively experimental albums, not to say they were like, crazy outside of what you would expect for the genre, but definitely like boundary pushing pop. After making 3 records of like boundary pushing pop, this feels like she's just stripping it back to basics and wants to make like a more straightforward, catchy pop album. In principle, I have no problem with that, like, at all. I think it's almost always going to go down to like delivery, but I will say that generally speaking, these kind of moves I'm not the biggest fan of. So like, I did not enjoy You Know What I'm Saying by Danny Brown. I did not connect with that record. Also, oh god, what's his name? How am I forgetting this? Kendrick Lamar. I know that I've forgotten the name of the record. The one he made after the oh my god, I can't remember the name of anything right now. After To Pimp a Butterfly, that's the one. The record after that I was not as big on. I know that one was still like fairly ambitious. It wasn't like as stripped back as maybe like Danny Brown on You Know What I'm Saying or Denzel Curry on Zoo. But I wasn't the biggest fan of either of those. And I did quite like Zoo from Denzel Curry, so it can be done well. And on this record, I think it's kind of like a mixed bag a little bit. Overall, it's kind of a shame that everything is just like a 2 to 3 minute pop song, because it means that a lot of these tracks essentially just have kind of like a fairly skeletal kind of like instrumental, and lyrically you're treading a lot of common ground for pop. But that's not to say this doesn't have its highlights, and to start with, the opener, Crash, is a really good song. It's a very peppy, upbeat opener with a slightly vintage vibe. It's got lots of detail, lots of little one-off sounds, decent structure. There's also like a guitar jam at the end that feels like it was pulled straight out of the 80s, which I just found very funny. But Crash was a solid song, and I just kind of wish maybe some of the other songs on here had as much detail or extra little percussive or kind of like one-off random like samples and stuff like that just peppered in, just to give these tracks more of a sense of progression, because I feel like that's the main issue it really runs into. But essentially, the run from like New Shapes up to Baby is almost all of those songs are like solid pop songs, not incredible, not terrible. Like, just all of them are like very, very solid. But it just feels like they're almost a touch underbaked a little bit. But to go into more specifics, so like New Shapes, I found like overall was a little bit clunky, which is a bit weird, especially considering I've just like kind of complimented them. But overall, the structure for New Shapes is all like fine. It's a solid pop song, but it's just the instrumental specifically for me felt a little clunky, and that kind of hurt the song a little bit. So overall, it's mostly built from this bassy, bright synth sound that comes in a very rhythmic pattern, and the whole rhythm for the song is like built around that, and the whole song is built just off of it melodically too. And as a result of that feeling clunky, this song didn't land for me a ton. I did like the guest singer on the end, but overall, like that combined with like the less inspiring progression of the song, kind of left me feeling a little bit lukewarm on this one. But the next song, Good Ones, is like a very generic pop song, and unfortunately, obviously, that lack of the personality that she kind of brought to the later projects does hurt this song, but I didn't hate it. It was like a solid pop song. I feel like almost any pop artist could have really made it. I don't feel like feels like a quintessential Charli song, especially. But I did enjoy it. I thought it was just okay. And the next song, Constant Repeat, is where things start to get going a little bit more for me. So, like, I really liked this song. It had a bassy beat that holds the stuttering synth melody together really, really well. The instrumental sounds like it would be something that I would expect, like, Hannah Diamond on a little bit. Maybe, not quite as out there, but still definitely, like, within that ballpark. And overall, I thought all the elements just complemented each other on this song really, really well. Felt like this is like the best example of what the album's trying to do, I think, at least conceptually. Like this just feels like a well-constructed, well-written, but stripped back pop song. So, I enjoyed Constant Repeat. Then Beg For You starts to venture into other territories, and maybe this is just me, because I know a lot of other people didn't enjoy this song anywhere as much as I did, but I actually really love this song. Maybe I'm just nostalgic for Garage being from the UK, but this song just put a smile on my face, every time I hear it. I love the DJ rewinds chucked throughout the song. It also feels like Charli's singing is a little more dynamic over this song compared to a lot of the more understated deliveries, which makes sense because that's kind of what she's been doing on a lot of the previous projects, and it really fits them. But here, it just, for some of these songs, I don't feel like I remember Charli so much as I remember the instrumentals, which is a bit unfortunate, but Beg For You definitely stands out in that regard. I feel like it's a highlight in the track listing for sure. The next song, Move Me, is a bit of a slower song. It's got the most understated instrumental by far so far on the project, with its whisper quiet beat and moody hanging synths. But I also actually quite like this one too. Charli's energy really matches the song well here, and there's enough detail to enjoy it overall. It's a bit more sappy and that kind of thing, but I still thought it was a solid song. Baby is the next song, and the beat to this tune really reminds me of something that Justin Timberlake would make, like right down to the peppy guitar on the chorus and the cinematic strings introing it and repeating it a couple other points. It's just a really danceable tune that kind of harkens back to that era of pop. It was another very, very solid song in the track listing. But this is kind of where we reach the point where things get a lot less consistent, honestly. So Lightning, this song's just a damn mess, man. I don't know how else to phrase it. I really didn't enjoy it. I felt like all the elements didn't come together particularly well at all. The flow of the song is a mess as well. It feels like stuff just happens or gets thrown in just to kind of like try it and see what sticks, and it just doesn't feel like it has a very interesting structure at all. It's not in like a chaotic way, which could have its own appeal. It definitely is chaotic, but I don't know, when you make like a chaotic song, I feel like you need to harness the chaos in some way, like a lot of mathcore bands do, and I just don't feel like this song really stuck the landing necessarily, even though I guess conceptually I don't mind the idea. But it just doesn't feel like it was particularly well thought out. I thought I guess you could argue it's a bit more experimental, a bit more reminiscent of that harsher era of Charli, or like the last two records essentially. But this one just really did not stick the landing. Maybe a couple of the sections I thought sounded cool, or I maybe enjoyed a part of a bit of the abrasiveness at some points, but yeah, I don't know, it was just a bit all over the place for me. Then the next song kind of continues this, unfortunately. Every Rule. So I've always struggled with Charli's slower songs. Usually, though, there's some kind of interesting detail in the instrumental or something like that I can really hook onto, but this did not land like that at all, and it is not an exception in terms of her slower songs. I actually think Move Me is a better song, although I can't quite remember if I would describe that as a slower song as opposed to just another moody song. But yeah, I found this one just overly sappy, lyrically kind of generic, and musically it didn't really inspire much. The whole thing's very, it makes sense, it's very naturally low-key, but it feels like the low-key instrumental is serving as the plate for an emotional meal. So when the meal falls flat, it's kind of hard to appreciate the artistry in the plate, right? And that's just kind of how I feel about this song. Not to say the instrumental, i.e. the plate, is particularly impressive. It's just kind of fine. But yeah, just did not land for me. Fortunately, in the back end, though, there are, the next two songs both sort of pulled me back a tiny bit. So Yuck is another throwbacky kind of tune with a great bass line, upbeat, kind of just like fun vibe throughout. It's nothing amazing, but it definitely pulled me back into the record. Like I said, I really feel like the extra percussive hits on that almost echo some of the snare rolls really added a lot to the track. I love those little like kind of one-off sound samples and whatnot when they're used like tastefully. I definitely feel like this was, and also the track just had like a decent progression as well, which is something I wouldn't say for even the other good songs on this record that I really enjoyed. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that. Used to Know Me is a weird one. I did like it, but I don't know if it's mostly nostalgia, because this is just some straight up quintessential like early noughties, maybe late 90s pop. It's got a very dancey beat, a bright keyboard melody laid over the top of it. Like I said, I've got a lot of nostalgia for the sound. I didn't even like it at the time, but it just kind of, reminds me of that time of being alive, and thus I'm held hostage by the song, essentially. I don't feel like this was an incredible song or anything. It wasn't, like, super detailed or anything. It really did feel very generic for the era, but that almost in a way served to benefit it, at least for my experience. It's a fun indulgence in nostalgia, but I do feel like Charlie's done this better in the past. Like a tune like 1999, really, like I'm definitely going to remember that song a lot better than I'm going to remember this song. And then finally we get to the end of the record. The song Twice pulls from the same bucket of tricks as the rest of the album, which is fine. I found the chorus a bit annoying though. And that's pretty much all I have to say about that song. It really is just like another kind of 2 to 3 minute pop song that pulls from a bucket of different pop influences. And what, actually, one thing I will say about this record, even though I haven't been like the most positive about it, is that I saw someone describe it as kind of like they felt like it was Charlie's love letter to pop, and I can actually really see that, especially when you're cutting it back, stripping it back to like its bare bones essentials and taking inspiration from lots of different eras. You've got kind of like some 80s disco vibes. You've got some like lush Justin Timberlake type stuff going on. There's some like influence from garage, like I mentioned. You've got, a bunch of like early noughties pop as well kind of thrown in. So, I can definitely understand that take. And I feel like this could have been a better record than it was, taking that kind of like basis. But for me, the problem was less about like I guess the songwriting, especially, more about the personality. It really feels like the absolute Achilles heel of this record is just, yes, there is a lot here in terms of influences, but all of it is delivered in kind of a fairly, I don't want to say super generic, but definitely like a fairly generic way for the style it's going for. And loads of these songs just feel like they don't even really need to be Charlie songs, especially. Like, I'm not getting her specific brand of pop from this album, especially. But yeah, I didn't hate this record by any stretch. I didn't think it was like terrible or anything. But definitely not up to snuff with her most recent stuff. Having said that, though, couple bangers I'll be listening to from this record for the foreseeable future. So, it's got that going for it. Like I said, I didn't think it was terrible. Hopefully she'll bounce back with the next one. Just go check this out if this sounds interesting to you. If you're a Charlie fan, it's only, 30 minutes long. It's not, I would be shocked if anyone was like utterly distraught at how bad this record is or anything like that, and I'd be surprised if there's that many people that like truly love it either. So yeah, if you're coming in, if you've listened to this record and you haven't heard the previous two Charli XCX records, I would highly recommend going back and listening to those. There's so much personality on display on both of those, so if you enjoyed this, then hopefully those will tickle your fancy, maybe even a little more. But hey, either way, I hope you're enjoying the music. I struggled with this one a little bit. Didn't think it was terrible, like I said. Just kind of okay. But yeah, just listen, everyone. That's kind of my full thoughts on this new Charli XCX record. I hope you're having a lovely, wonderful day, and hopefully I'll see you around in the future. Peace out, everybody.